The goal of the workshop is that by the end of the workshop is to be brainstorming using the collective knowledge of everyone's experiences in the room to think about policy needs that policymakers can listen to. And what I'll do from my position at the James Hutton Institute is be observing the session and collecting these ideas and then packaging them and using them as a piece of evidence to think about what's missing in the policy landscape and what can we do to create that supportive environment for new entrants to succeed. Because we know there's energy, we know there's passion. So that's the point of the activity, and I'll facilitate it to try and bring some of that out. So to do this, what we have is a panel of some folks who either are policy influencers, who have experience with policy, who think about policy in the farming landscape. And to start us off, I would just be interested if you could, introduce yourself and say why you think policy might be important for new entrant farming, and give a chance to talk about your organization a little bit. Because beyond everything, just a chance to see what resource providers are available will also be really useful.
Thanks. So my name's Adam. I'm a new entrant myself, working in horticulture down in East Devon, and part of the Land Workers Alliance, which is a union of farmers, growers, foresters, land-based workers. We're going for around 6 years. We're primarily working kind of small and medium scale producers in a kind of ecological framework, often with a direct selling element. And so in that context, I'm working on new entrant policy. I think for us, we see policy as one of the main influencing factors in who starts farming, where they do it, how how successful they are. I mean, policy is part of the landscape, along with community, along with the land, the ecology of the place. It determines the success or the failures of businesses. And for us, it's also very much situated in the context of we need a massive renewal in farming. We're an ever-aging farming population. We've lost tens of thousands of farms in the last 10, 20 years, and we need to have a much more systematic approach to getting more people on the land, working viable businesses, and making livelihoods in ecological food production.
Hello, Richard enw fi. Hello, my name is Richard Evans. I work for the Agricultural Department of the Welsh Government, so directly involved in policy development. And one of my policy areas, which I have responsibility for, is young entrants. I don't think I'm not going to go down to why we need young entrants. I think that is we're here, and I think that is quite obvious, and you just mentioned that there. In terms of what I want out of this is an honest conversation from everybody. It's quite easy for us to think as policy officers that we know what's needed or how we're going to be delivered. This is a perfect opportunity and quite an open forum to say, well, actually, what do you think is needed? And our role as civil servants is to support the minister and respond to what's needed as well. So that's why I'm here, really.
I'm here to tell Richard what we want. I've spoken enough today, really. But in terms of why I think policy is important, I think before I got involved, when I moved home, I didn't actually realise how much we can influence policy and sort of influence the schemes and programmes that are being ran. I've ended up, some of you might appreciate this as well, but when you're trying to set yourself up, when you're trying to farm, initially I was actually working full time and trying to farm, to engage in these sort of issues can be quite time consuming. So I was doing stuff with our local union, so with FEW, and then there's NFU as well in Wales. So I was going to meetings with them, doing stuff with them, and then I'm also on the Welsh Government, I can't remember how we've called it, the Young Voice of Farmers Forum, which is part of the sort of new Yes scheme. So I sit on that as well. And then also speak within the National Trust as a sort of the young farmer. And it can be quite, when you're expected to go to meetings and evenings, when you've already got quite a lot of time constraints, I've struggled a little bit with that, so I think it'd be interesting to look at today how you engage people that are actively farming and having to get engaged with policy in their own time, because that's definitely something that I've sort of struggled with it a little bit. Sort of some of the things that we've got around the room that I've ended up being involved in. the sort of training and mentoring, again I said it before, but Farming Connect, for whoever viewer in Wales, offers so much training and mentoring. And I think it's just a case of really just go for it on those and look what they've got available, because and they've very much got open ears. So if there's something you want to suggest to them, they do listen. And then the access to land side of stuff, obviously trying to get a farm, but then through Farming Connect, you have to have 3 hectares initially, or a holding number, to be able to sign up to it. So that was something that I really struggled with as a complete first time, that I didn't have any land or a holding number to be able to access the support for new entrants. So there's little things like that I think we need to raise up and say that it needs to be improved. So yeah, I think policy is really important. I think we can impact it a lot. It's basically just the aim. What are you aiming for? That's sort of how I see it. And then putting programs or rules and regs and things in place to achieve it. So yeah, I think it'd just be interesting to hear what people have found as the stumbling blocks, or what's stopped you getting the support you need in a way.
Hello, I'm Yvonne Walton. I'm here representing my son Scott Walton, who on the 1st of September took on a holding in his own name. Unfortunately, what Teleri was just highlighting about that 3 hectares and a holding number to be able to sign up for Farming Connect meant that he fell through the net for the Young People into Agriculture grant that came about last year. And I would like to see that there is more put in place to help and to handhold, should we say, first generation farmers who don't have that backup knowledge of parents who have already been running through Farming Connect and already know the ins and outs of the computer system for Rural Payments Wales. When you are a first generation, genuine young farmer who is really keen to get into agriculture and it's where your passion lies, there should be more coming from the powers that be to help them along.
Yeah, I think we'll have a chance to hear from everyone, but I think because we only have an hour, we'll just have the panel start now. But I think that was a really good introduction, and thank you for sharing. So how I was thinking of framing this workshop to encourage comments just like that from everyone is around the room, right here on this side, as we have, especially looking from a research perspective, the classic challenges for new entrants. So we have, access to markets, which is if I'm producing food, do I have the ability to benefit from places to sell them that give me a decent price, or to receive the product that I want to sell? We have access to training and mentoring. Is it the type of training that I want, as well as availability, low cost, in the right place, in the right location? Land use planning. In what ways are cities, municipalities, governments deciding the zoning regulations or the laws of what can be built or used on the land influence a new entrant's ability to take advantage of it? Land access, we talk about that all the time. Not just the ability to find land, but the ability to benefit from it. So if I gain access to a good lease, but the rent is too high, then I don't really have access to it. Access is more about the continuous negotiations to receive benefits from it. And then finally, access to capital. We heard from Cody about the ability to get a subsidized grant, or through private mechanisms in the next workshop, in the room in the next session. So my question to you all is, within these areas, and if there's an area that I haven't talked about that you want to talk to, there's going to be a space, is I'd love to hear from you about your own experiences. What have been some challenges or some innovations solving some of these areas? And then once we kind of brainstorm some of these challenges, we want to use the expertise of the panel and you all to try and find some policies that engage with some of those challenges, and that'll lead us to thinking about what gaps are there. So I was wondering if anyone wants to be bold and kick off thinking about, in your own experience, just like we heard, about some land access challenges or market access challenges or opportunities that you've had either being a new entrant or a resource provider. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. My name is Murat. I come from Turkey. I live in Liverpool. I do somehow some farming in Turkey, help of my dad. I come from farming family, and I work in hospitality. And I would like to change my career to farming. And that's one of the biggest challenges. It take 2 years for me to find Farming Connect. Because no one really helps out. Not much place to ask and find out questions, and you want to reach the answers. And one of the things I would like to say, we all know farming is a long-term as business also in many ways. We all have families and mortgage, council tax, all these payments. And as myself, I think if I want to go, and I do want to go farming, and I will have to look after my family. And first thing I think, how I can provide my family income rather than having a long term, in a short term. So first thing it come in my mind is milking. That is what I try to do in Turkey also. We have some ewes, we try to milk them. That milk will pay all costs, and the lamb will be all our profit. Is there anything, it can be goat or a sheep? That's what I'm looking for. Any helps will be appreciated.
Can I ask you, when you were initially looking for support, you say that you didn't find Farming Connect. Were you Googling where can I get support, or how were you trying to find it?
I was Googling about the farmers and how to enter us, who can help. Thank God to Facebook. That's how I found you guys. And I speak every with the farmers, and they weren't really willing to help. It was a little bit disappointed. I thought it would be helpful from the farmers who will. I always go to farmers market and try to find the questions and answers, but not really much get help, really, being honest.
So were you looking for a relief milking job to...
It's like I would like to be also like a sort of partnership. Example, let's give you example. If one milking, say, goat, they got 1,000 milking goats, and would there be any chance to pay for 100 of them I buy? And other 200 or 300, can I get any help from somehow, from somewhere?
With a share from
Yeah. And I'm not good with paperwork, so I will need someone to look after the book also.
Out of interest here, obviously agriculture has devolved in the UK. So just a show of hands, just how many from Wales here? So the majority Scotland, England, Liverpool, Northern Ireland. So there are different, so Farming Connect, for instance, wouldn't have, unfortunately, outside of Wales, except for this, obviously. But we're fortunate in Wales that Farming Connect would be able to support, look at share farming opportunities, highlight some opportunities to go into share farming and help them that way. So, unfortunately, we don't have that in England at the moment, but
I'm not far from Chester, I can move. I changed location.
Maybe.
I mean, a lot of those issues are something we're trying to really build on and work on in England, because exactly the kind of obstacles you're highlighting there, and we do look kind of jealously at some of the work that's been done in Wales, and I'm seeing a much more supportive kind of policy situation with loads more attention to some of the needs of new entrants. And I think that's a very common experience in England, that there's very little support available. Most of it is kind of informal and requires that you're already somehow involved in the farming community. It can be hard to get into that.
Wales is advanced in that aspect of it.
It's far easier to do it in Wales.
Yeah.
Everything, like RPW, is straightforward, it's simple. The English system, we got a hold in Wales and England. the English system is completely backwards in comparison. And like you have to talk to somebody in Wales to get through to anyone about England, but they can't figure it out how to work together to make it correspond. Is that our land doesn't actually run from Wales to England, but we know people who do have land, like fields in both, and they say it's a nightmare. Like, we're lucky they are separate holdings, but the Welsh system is far more advanced, like Farming Connect, everything. Wales seems to help farmers more than the English system do.
So would you, if you had a question or a query or needed some support, you would
Ask
go
you
to
for it.
there?
Yeah, the Welsh government is far, they'd help you a lot, and they're more willing to help you.
Yeah.
They're more out there for the farmer rather than, yeah, it's just another fact sort of thing.
Step number one, keep farming connect.
Please. Can I just ask a question? Are you first generation farmers?
No, family farm.
Okay.
I'm Holly. I'm from a horticulture cooperative in North West Wales, near Carnarvon, and also part of Land Works Alliance, LWA Cymru. And we're all a cooperative with 8 permanent members, all of whom are new entrants. We were lucky enough through a complicated arrangement to have access to land, but from work with LWA Cymru, it's clear, and just coming to a place like this, it's clear that the problem for new entrants is access to land. And so even if there's the finance available, there's not necessarily the land being sold if it's not coming up for market. And as part of our response to Brexit and our land last year, we asked our members for ideas, and some of the ideas that came up were to try to combine these two problems of finance and availability. So on the one hand, on the finance side, having a national land bank, so a bank that is specifically aimed at providing low-cost mortgages or supporting tenant farmers that want to buy their land. And on the other side, on the access to land side, one idea that came up was every time a large farm is sold, and I'm not sure at what point we put the cut-off point of what is and isn't a large farm, but so as a principle, that 2% of that land sold could be set aside to be land made available for new entrants, and that could be funded with this national land bank, so the two could work together. Similarly, in Wales, one thing we have which doesn't exist elsewhere is the One Planet Development Policy, which is like very few people seem to know about, but it's quite remarkable. If you want to do a sustainable land-based business, you can get planning permission to build a home to live there. It's quite a complicated process, and it's also a process that, again, requires quite a lot of capital to even be able to do it. So even though it's a great idea, it's not open to everyone. So again, trying to connect that One Planet Development Policy, which is great, with other policies, especially right now, Wales is designing its own agricultural policy to look at, well, how could you make something like that available to people who don't have capital? And yeah, so those are some of the ideas that come from our membership.
So I'm Bronwyn, I'm from the National Farmers Union, the Welsh branch. So I just think what's important to realise with new entrants, so I look after the Next Generation group, so it's a group of 20 young farmers, and it's so interesting to hear because they've all got different routes into farming. So there's share farmers, there's tenant farmers, National Trust tenant farmers, council farms, but it's also important to remember that even if you are from a family farm, you don't necessarily have the say in what is happening on the farm. I think you can't always assume that just because you're in a family farm and you've got maybe access to working, you have the decision-making power on what happens on that farm. So I think that needs to be remembered. And I think what's important with future policy, I think particularly it's quite an apt day to be talking about policy in Wales, is that it needs to fit for all of these different types of farms, from a tenant farmer to a share farmer to a family farm with lots of different intricacies in each family farm. Policy has to work for it all, and I know that's not easy, but it has to be remembered in any future policy. And I think maybe with Brexit on land, there might have been some gaps maybe for tenant farmers, or share farming is quite tricky, and I think each case is individual, but it is so vital that these core entrants for new farmers have to be fully evaluated for any future policy. That's what I'm thinking.
Just on the point about land, my family farm was in Scotland, left the farm 30 years ago, come back to the UK and looked to farm. And there is a lot of land available in the UK for sale across all the country. But if you want to be able to live and operate on your farm, you need to have the mega money. To buy land, you don't. But then you go back to policy, and the policy says you cannot build on that land. You can't, all the restrictions of planning, whether access, or whatever it happens to be. So you find land, you speak to the council, and the council say, you will never build on that land. So I see where you're coming from. But setting aside extra land doesn't resolve the problem, because there is land available. Resolving the planning issue, or what size holding you can qualify as a farm. And every time you speak to the council, it's to stop city dwellers coming out and building their nice big house in the countryside. You understand that. But if you actually want to farm, you still need the money to buy the land, and then you need somewhere to live. So I think there are two issues there.
There's a wider point that you raised there, that young entrants of policy is not just one policy. It cuts across planning policy,
100%.
Inheritance taxation policy, inheritance, environmental policy, because that will impact what people can do, finance, develop. So there isn't. It's not a nice tidy one policy. If we sort that one, and we've got so many other things influencing it, that it is a package of policies in effect, but they all have to align in some way to support a young entrant. And even defining a new or young entrant. Because we could spend this hour trying to define, you know, is it somebody who works an hour a week in agriculture? Or is it 1 acre of horticulture, but 1 acre with 2 ewes? Is that something we want to support? So there are. It sounds quite simple. Okay, policy to support young entrants sounds quite simple, but it's so many other things around it. And what happens then is you have a policy, and exactly as I mentioned there, it doesn't fit every unique situation, and you get people who you'd want to support, not who you support, and vice versa. So, yeah, so it is yeah. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying it's just an added wider issue, really, isn't it?
I think the definition used to be young entrant and new entrant, so it was young farmer and new entrant. So it didn't actually matter there was an age there, apart from the 40,000 grant was entitlement for those under the age of 40. So those over the age of 40 who are new entrants didn't get any of that. So you had to be under 40. But what's the difference between a new entrant under 40 and a new entrant over 40? Is there some expectation that you would have extra, you've now got the money because of your age? So I understand if you're saying you have son coming into a new farm, but does it matter whether he's 18 or 48? He's still trying to get into an industry and requires the same support from government, whether it's financial or planning or whatever it happens to be. So now you put in an age cut-off, and then you talk about young farmers, and we talk about new farmers or new entrants.
I think it's clear to me that there needs to be a greater sensitivity in the policy. I don't think any of those are massively complicated issues, really. We would definitely like to see a bit more means testing, I think, and that can help overcome some of the age issues, because often at the moment the limited support that's available tends to benefit those who already have the more capital, the more access to resources, the more knowledge in many cases. And many new entrants who are coming without any family money into the sector, often they don't have a kind of family inheritance of knowledge either, and they face the biggest set of issues. And I think capital grants is something that we see as very important in that sense, and there are loads of young farmers and merchants who don't need a capital grant, but there are many more for whom it would make all the difference between the success or failure of a business. And I think we need to find ways to make policy more sensitive to that. And hearing about the great success that some people have had with loans, for example, to be able to make the most of a loan, you need to be in a position to have the confidence that you can make the repayments on that loan, and that the ideas you're putting into practice are going to survive. So loans aren't always the most effective mechanism either for really targeting those who most need the support.
Would, those of you that have tried to start out, would you agree that maybe training and mentoring actually, and sort of a helping hand and business help would actually be more important than actually the capital side of stuff?
Initially, yes.
Yeah.
To build up a head of steam, I guess. Similar situations. As gentlemen here where been away for a long time and come back to the farm and not a young farmer anymore. It's quite discriminatory too, I think. Maybe a new entrant rather than a young entrant. But Farming Connect, once I did find it, it took me a little while as well. It took me best part of 3 or 4 months to come across Farming Connect and start making into the mentors and things like that. But from some of the discussions that I've had there, it has been really interesting. And you've put it into context of Wales. We have the Environment Act here, the Wellbeing Future Generations Act, and it's to fulfill some of the amazing potential of those elements of legislation. I think policy should be drawing people along in certain directions as well, which it might be doing with the results of the Brexit consultation, our land consultation. I mean, I don't know, I haven't really followed how that's panning out yet, but in terms of linking more people with the land, and there does seem to be, certainly where I'm living at the moment on Gower, there is a large amount of young people who are looking to link with the land, and there's a good history there of the small circular-based economies producing food and products for the city of Swansea. Everything's there within that small scale, which is a great model that could be rolled out across the whole of the country, really, in theory. You have your urban centres and they're surrounded by rural areas, and there's within those urban centres there's a lot of young people who are looking to link themselves with the land. One Planet development is certainly a way that could be achieved, but it doesn't suit everybody. And at the moment, in going hand in hand with the amount of people that want to come and be linked with land, you have the diversity of ideas there as well in terms of what being a farmer really means these days. There's so many things that it could support, or you could run a business on a bit of land, and that's something that policy would be should be designed to capture, to support all of those different elements. But it does have such diversity, and it does cut across many elements of policy, as you discussed earlier, including planning and environmental policy and things like that. For myself, the picture is really unfolding as to where we will be. The land that we have at the moment, it's not a big farm. It's currently tenanted out to about 4 graziers, but we half expect them to start handing the land back as maybe the belts get tightened and they start to focus on the land that they own rather than the land that they're renting out. So once they start to hand it back, what do we do with it as a family? It doesn't provide an income other than for my parents. The siblings are all independently working and things like that. But if we did all of a sudden have this couple of 100 acres given back to us, it's like, well, what do we do with that? The options are to farm it in a way that we've all been out of that industry for a little bit of time now, so the mentoring aspect of Farming Connect is going to be hugely beneficial in that sense. Capital and investment as well is going to be quite interesting because we don't have any stock, we don't have a lot of machinery left within the holding itself.
Do you feel like it's a bit of like a all or nothing, is it? It's either you take it on, you farm full on, I am farming here, or you let someone else come in and rent it? Does it,
that could be one of the options, yes, but I mean, my line of work is a conservation sector, so I'm advising other people on how to manage their land, and I think, well, it would be lovely to roll that out across the land that's been in our family for 5 generations now. So it's not really an all or nothing, but it's having sessions like this, it really gives you a peek into all of the other options that could be available, whether we do split it down and have APD style things across the farm and open it up to other people to allow them to come and do their amazing diversification ideas on the farm and develop that whole industry, because we're looking at rural sustainability here as well, I guess. And it's not just providing provision of public goods, although that's a large element of it, but how do we then support that farming community which is quite removed from large urban centres?
There's a lot of things to fix.
Yeah. That's why these sorts of living sessions are really, really useful.
But you have got access to land.
Yeah.
So you had a big step to start with.
Yeah.
The hardest thing is getting access to land. You're going to rent it or whatever you're going to do. If I give you a 300-acre farm, give it to you for nothing for 10 years, and then you say, right, go to the bank, go and buy a load of sheep or cattle or whatever you want to do just as a normal farm, you can't do it. End of story. And if you wanted to buy a tractor or a quad bike or something else to feed them, how do you get on? Or if you want to buy a grant, yeah, you get 40% back or 60% back. Do you need to spend 100,000? Yeah, I've got 100,000 just kicking about. And then I get 40 grand back. So how do you get on from there if you have got the land or ground for nothing?
What have you seen as you're saying you're both farming and family, what have you found as the main sort of stumbling point or barrier? So you've got land, what's the tricky bit next?
It may be off topic, but I think it's the end price you get. We're more sheep farming. We don't have a say in how much we get. Yes, diversification is an option. Not everybody can diversify. Not everybody can have holiday lets, do lamb boxes, farm shop. It's not going to happen. It's not possible. Monmouthshire, a lot of people have already diversified into everything. I think we need to look at our end market. We need to back British more. We sell a good product, but we don't market our product. The supermarkets market our product. They determine the price we get. We don't get a set price. We don't know what she has 2 lambs, what each lamb is going to fetch. I think there needs to be, it might be more away from the policy side, but so you have a more determined outcome. Because even though once you've got everything, it's hard to make money in farming. And there needs to be, to stay as farmers, needs to be that actual drive for the profit. And although you can do everything by the book and everything as good as you can't guarantee every year you're going to make a profit, because you don't determine what you sell your product for. And I think that's a very hard thing for us as farmers. And Brexit, whether you like it or not, we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe it's a real good time for us to look at marketing our own product. To, as Cody said, there's not much lamb over in America to sell it over there. But why are we importing all the New Zealand lamb when we do produce a good product ourselves? As we have the highest welfare standards, why can't we do more to encourage farmers that their product is worth that push and that drive, and all stand together? We don't have a big voice. French farmers, if they protest, they get cured. They can go and block car parks up, spread muck in supermarkets, and they get cured. We don't. Nothing comes from us if we did it. Whether we're not strong enough in our voice, how we go about it, I don't know. I just feel there's a big need for a bit more push of something for farmers to actually get that.
It's like we are in unique position, I guess. Agriculture's evolved. I mean, Welsh Government and our Minister make policy that's decided through Welsh Government. So our voice is to go and lobby against, or lobby and say what we want to Welsh Government, isn't it? And these guys are making policy. So we have almost quite a short chain to where the policy's made. So we just need, as new entrants, you guys have got a really unique perspective and unique outlook to the industry. So let's tell Welsh Government about what you're thinking and what you need, because they should be able to make some form of change, because it's just down in Cardiff, isn't it? So I just think it's make the most of what we can do, and I think we're at a really unique time. There's another consultation coming out now before the summer. A consultation wants to hear people's voices, and I guess there's one in England and Scotland. It is to hear what people want for future policy, and that's the time to say what you want and what you need.
But then that's, you talk about the voice, but that's what the NFU was for.
Yeah.
And that's why we left.
But not everyone's in the NFU or FW. So we do what we can for our members, but everyone has their own. At the end of the day, we'll have two members with two different opinions. We say what we think is best for the industry, but not necessarily everybody agrees, and not everyone is a member.
We're breaking the monopoly of the supermarkets, because agriculture is held to ransom by the supermarkets. And if you won't go against the government, and they won't go against the supermarkets. So at the moment, we're all held blackmail at cost by the supermarkets. And that's exactly the point that you're making.
And then you look at like Hyd Cymru, Meat Promotion Wales, they promote to the farmers. The farmers know they produce a good product. They don't need promotion aimed back at them. They need it going out to the public that need to know that we produce a good product.
So just coming back, we do lobby really, really hard down in Cardiff, and we do hear try our best to hear what our members have to say. So I just really want to make that clear, and I guess that's why I'm here today, because I am always wanting to hear what people have to say. But not everyone in farming agrees. I know we are quite a small industry, but there is a real range of voices. There's different opinions in this room. If you look at future policy, if you look at Brexit, not necessarily everybody agrees, but it's really important that everyone makes their voice heard as much as they can. And I really do try to do what I can in lobby, but everyone has a different opinion, and we do all want the best for the industry. But I mean,
before we go down the route of all policy areas, is it possible? Well, some haven't had the idea to talk yet. Could we just, the ones that haven't said anything, if they're willing to do so, just to mention, say what is their if you have the power, what is the thing that you, or the area that you want, or you think the support you want to help you get out of the family ladder?
Yeah, so that's a really good segue, because I was wondering if you all could write that down on the little note cards that are on the seats, and then because I want to capture those all those ideas on that chart. So yeah, if you're willing to entertain, just as you said, Richard, what would you do? What would you change? It could be a specific policy idea. We've heard some really concrete proposals about land making, or it could be, I would like to solve this problem, a program to help with this, something. And then once you've written that down, maybe share it with your partner, and then we'll collect them all.
Just one thing.
Yeah, just one or two max. Okay, you all. We have a little bit of time left to capture all of this great discussion. So I was wondering if I could pass the mic around and hear some of these ideas that came out of these discussions, and I just want to capture as many as I can so that everyone can benefit.
Yeah, I suppose what we're coming up with is the different points at which people start on that farming ladder mean that what's going to work for them is different, and so a new entrant support package is really what we've got to be looking at, isn't it? It's something that can meet different people where they're at and overcome the specific obstacles. And we're a fairly good example of that, of a quite different situation. So personally, for me, knowledge was less of a problem because loads of farmers were very willing to share, and there was a good informal exchange set up. For me, the bigger issues are finding land and the start-up costs. I know the business I want to run, I know it works and how to do it now. It's just there's a layer of quite hard financial obstacles that I could do with some help coming over. And for you two?
We're sort of, we've got the land, and we want to try and push rented the ground out in previous times, whereas now we're able to take it back and work the land ourselves for our family and for the children that are coming along, and just gaining that access of information of to work around the policies and make it best, get the best for us, really.
Yeah, different types.
Yeah. Just reducing the numbers to package really, so that we can find out what we need to be doing. So yeah, different problem I suppose. But oh, sorry. Different problems in that we've got the land, I guess the farm, but I want to know what we need to do really to start farming, take it back ourselves, and obviously children are interested, so it's knowing where to look and what help to get really.
It's access to land is the main thing, but the big thing that's most important is profit at the end of the day. Because I know everyone thinks, oh yeah, but it doesn't matter which way your profit's coming from, if it's coming from last year grant or if it's coming from farming from 7-year lands. If you're not having any profit come into the farm, you're not going to last very long at all. And so it's land access was the main biggest one, and then your startup cost, which are very similar to you.
Yeah, we were talking a lot about grants and the problems with them. For me, I'm in a similar position, I think, to yourselves, come back to the farm, but lots of people come up to me and say, oh, you can get a grant for this, you can get a grant for that. I've had a bit of a nightmare trying to find, one, what is available, and two, what I have to do to get them. I know it's a difficult time at the moment with Brexit and everything. Everyone's sort of saying, oh, you need to wait until the end of the year, but I think there needs to be a framework where everything's a bit more clear to people coming into farming now to see just what help they can get, because it's a bit of a minefield on the internet.
Guaranteed profit almost, or guaranteed price for your products, because what I said earlier, you need that support and that backing that what you are producing is going to fetch a decent price.
About reduction restrictions on land use. So if it was your own land, if you wanted a farm shop, develop. But even within the UK, we don't have equal permitted development rights. England has just raised those to 1,000 square metres per year. Wales is still 452. Scotland is the same. So even within the United Kingdom, we don't have a joined up, grown up system of thinking or policy. And so when you're trying to do or develop it on a farm, you're up against the planners. We're in Cardiff, we've got a farm up here. And the policy seems to be focused more on the folk from the city and their views and their access to the countryside, rather than those of us in the countryside trying to maintain rural community and rural spirit, keep the rurality on going, and yet we're restricted in anything we do in case the lightly clad hill walkers don't like it, and I find that truly frustrating.
Yes, challenge to Welsh Government to really influence in terms of policy the markets, sort of the end product pricing, which you brought up earlier, which I thought was a really good point. So challenged to the supermarkets, really the big businesses who are dominating and holding the farmers to ransom. We know that smaller is better, shorter supply chains are really the way forward, so it seems the evidence seems to be pointing that way. So if there's policy that can really encourage that and support that for the future of the local communities, the sustainability of the environment.
I swapped cards with John, so you're going to have to... but, so I can't quite read your writing, but... no, it's fine. Mine was just a more apprenticeship, was it? Yeah, like more apprenticeship schemes, because that's effectively what I'm on, and that's the only way that I've been able to run a farm myself. It's not my farm, I just get a wage, and that's perfect for me. And the other thing was more sort of promotion as farming as a viable career. It didn't really seem as, when I was in school, something that I could do and that was available to me. So I think taking away some of those stereotypes and
promoting the job, really.
I think I spent most of my time avoiding answering the question and always coming up with more challenges. And I think, and as people have been talking, I think whatever policies come up with, they need the flexibility of recognising that no two farms are the same. And I don't know how you do that, and I know it's a real challenge. But I think things like when you're designing grant schemes are designed for specific bits of kit, for specific types of farms. But actually, everyone is doing things slightly differently. How you work that flexibility into policy but still have that level of accountability, I don't know, but I think that flexibility and being able to work with the new ideas that are coming through from the younger generation and allowing farming to evolve, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I just think future policy needs to have productive, viable farming businesses at its heart that is producing top quality food. But these businesses need to be productive and viable for them to even be in existence. And I think we were talking as well with me about there's access to land as an issue, but also capital for stock and infrastructure as well. That's obviously quite a big issue for a lot of new entrants that should be considered, I guess, alongside the access to land as well.
Mine was about the current 5 hectare limit for the basic payment scheme, and actually the principle of payments being linked to how much land you own, and that being 5 hectares. There's actually a lot of horticulture, particularly that's below 5 hectares, and it also comes into the planning. So for permitted development, again, as you're saying, that's a restriction. And yeah, so the payment shouldn't be based on what you already have in terms of capital. It should be about outcomes. Then the second one, which is linked to this question of short supply chains, and in the Brexit and Our Land, they talk a lot about public goods. Food isn't specifically a public good, and from Land Workers Alliance Cymru, we weren't saying food per se should be, but the access to healthy, sustainable, local food for communities should be considered a public good. So then that would mean building the kinds of infrastructure that enable that. So whether that's making more direct marketing easier, so that currently you can't do the land boxes, but if there were more facilities that would enable you to not be dependent on the supermarkets, so you have more control over your price, whether that's like local packaging, local abattoirs, lots of different things.
I've heard just about everybody's comments already, and I think there's quite a few recurring themes there. So what I'm going to say is hitting on something that somebody else has already said about a bit more flexibility required in the grant schemes, and what you hope to gain from it as a farmer, and the end product should have more of an impact in the application process. And Richard also said earlier about means testing, perhaps with applications for grants. I think that would be a help. And that's about all, really.
As you probably noticed, I've won the room with a very different accent. So I'm not, I was just intrigued that one of the suggestions was that all Welsh subsidies should be moved to Northern Ireland. So that'll maybe give you a clue where I live. But I head up, John McAllister, I head up the land mobility scheme in Northern Ireland. So many of the issues that have been discussed will be very familiar, access to land, I suppose profit, I suppose stuff around different rules in the UK, that's devolution, because we, interestingly, in permitted development, we have a debate that some people are arguing that should be raised at the moment, but we don't actually have a devolved government to do it. So actually people are depending what side of the debate you're on, they're taking it, some people are screaming this is terrible, and other people think this is brilliant, keep the government away for a while. But so to take your pick, so you should try and get rid of your government at some stage too, a few years, see how you get on. The stuff around some of the things that we would like to see around tax changes. We have a particular issue with Conacre, which is more a UK equivalent of grazing license, short-term grazing, like 9-10 months a year, and how do we encourage people into longer term leasing? So if you're a new entrant, can we at least guarantee you that land for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? So our friends in the Republic of Ireland have changed. It was a particularly Irish thing, predating even partition. So we would like to see those tax changes to help encourage things like that. And I do think actually it would be a benefit here. And it is just always worth knowing that sometimes policy changes, whatever you fix on one side, somebody will try and move and manipulate to come on the right side of that policy agenda. So it's making sure that you don't, open one door and close another. Things that have worked well in Northern Ireland have been things like interest-free loans and stuff to help new entrants get in, because you build in the disciplines of things like doing a business plan. You build in the discipline of it's funded through a commercial bank, so you have those disciplines and even the speed that would make. I'm not saying about civil servants here. I remember doing a promotional thing about it one time, and the question came to a banker and to a civil servant, how quickly they could turn it around, and the civil servant said, well, we would hope to be able to do it in 3 months. And the banker said we could do it in a day and a half. So I thought that was sort of the difference between the two. Although banks did get into some difficulties. So it's those types of policy changes, and for us in the land mobility stuff, it is very much trying to match up older farmers wanting out and younger people that's wanting in that don't have. Your point about, suddenly you go to buy a tractor, you go to buy even a very modest bit of kit to start farming. I think even when you're in farming, established farm, you forget that even a dairy herd with 100 cows, you mightn't say it's a big herd, but he might have £250,000 worth of stock on that one farm that you're thinking it's not a big farm, but there could be £250,000 worth of just like animals before you've even looked at a tractor, and that's why it is so incredibly difficult. And that's why things like share farms, profit shares, whatever way you want to tailor it, or indeed longer term leasing of land, I think is that way of opening up for some really good people to come into the industry. And the industry needs, that generational change and that knowledge transfer that new skills will bring to it. Or, for like Wales, Northern Ireland's biggest industry is the agri-food sector. We have very little else. There's only so many episodes of Game of Thrones that you can make. But you still need to put good quality food, and at times feel you're rewarded for that. But probably the challenges on the market price, very hard to get policy to do that, but can we make sure we're producing what the market definitely wants? Can we make sure the friends in the Republic of Ireland at Board BIA, which are actually a pretty impressive track record of marketing some products at times, but that's I'm out of time, Adam.
Yeah. I think we're actually all out of time. I would want to continue to go because we're having a good discussion, but the other sessions are going to require us to move on. But I was just maybe, Adam, if you just say like in 30 seconds, just closing about policy engagement and why that's useful.
It's a big question, isn't it? I think it comes, as I said at the beginning, essentially policy is a hugely influencing factor on the success or failure of businesses, who gets access to industry and resources. I think one thing that came up through this that I think is really important is that we take account of those higher level policy things, right? Such as prices, because ultimately the prices we're paid are policy, they're outcomes from policy-based decisions. And some of those are much harder processes to influence. And it's really important that we as farmers do come together, work together and address some of those higher level challenges, as well as working on new entrant support and agricultural policy with our respective devolved administrations. To me that's crucial, and it comes down to our our unity as farmers, our organising, our strength, our ability to make the obstacles we face clear and the solutions that we need obvious and inevitable, that's essentially going to affect the success or failure of a lot of different farms, a lot of different people coming into the sector.
Thank you all. Go to your next session. Stay if you want. We can talk about policy again.